Redux Devtools. It might need to be renamed because it's not just for Redux anymore. So take this cool little form over here, right? We've got these 3 fields and we can enter some data into it. And then we can go over into our Redux Devtools over in the Chrome Inspector, and we can see that we've logged the actions. And that's really cool. You can actually get to see what data has gone into your store. And you get this really cool slider where you can move it back and forth and actually change the state and do some time travel debugging. It's really cool. But is this Redux? Nope. There's no Redux in this entire video. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to implement Redux Devtools connectors using Vanilla.js, basic React hooks, and everybody's new favorite, Zustand. All right, let's get into it. Hi, I'm Jack Herrington, a principal full stack engineer, and part of the reason I do this channel is because I want to show you some cool stuff that you might not have thought of. And I think a lot of people, when they think about Redux Devtools, think naturally about Redux. And if I don't have Redux, then I can't use Redux Devtools. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. So we all have this really popular extension installed, but most of us, I would say, don't use it on a daily basis. So what I want to do is give you the tools to add this to your toolkit so that you can use this in absolutely any application and any framework to help you debug through your problems. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off experimenting with this in Vanilla.js, and then we're going to go and look at how to integrate it with React hooks, and then we're going to look at how to do it with Zustand, which is a popular new React state manager. All right, let's go jump over to the terminal and start our Vanilla.js app. So I'm going to make a new directory called Redux Devtools, and then bring that up in VS Code. And in there, I'm going to make a new folder called Vanilla. And in there, I'm going to create a new file called index.html, as well as index.js. And in my index.html, let's make it a simple HTML file. It's got body. It's got an input field in there of a type of text. And an ID of, let's say, name. And then right next to it, I'm going to put a span. And that is going to have basically the value of that name. So we're going to keep those two in sync using Vanilla.js. And people say that I don't do Vanilla.js. So name span. All right, here we go. So let's go and take our name ID over here. We'll go and first get the input element by using document.getElementById. Give it that name. And then we'll get our span element by getting name span. Did I get that right? Name span, name span. Cool, awesome. All right, so now we need to watch for any key ups, input changes basically. So we'll do add an event listener, and we're gonna look for key up. And that's gonna give us an event. And there you go, yep, span inner text. Let's do that, inner text. And we'll do it off the event instead. So event target value, just like we would in React. And then I got to go back over to my index.html. And in here, I've got to go bring in my script. So I'm bringing in script source, index.js, finish off the script. And let's try this out. I'm going to click this button down here, go live. That's going to bring up a... Okay, cool. So now I want to track this. I'm going to bring up my inspector and I'm going to go to my Redux tab here. All right, so I'm not seeing any actions or any state in here, which makes sense. So what I want to do is connect my Vanilla.js app to Redux Devtools. So I'm going to go over here to the API for Redux Devtools, and that's linked to in the description down below. And I'm going to grab out the window.redux devtools extension. And you can see that if I just go over into my console, I can just hit return on that, and I actually have that installed. So that's pretty cool. And that's accessible from the page. So let's try that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to connect to it. So I'm going to say I have a connection. And I'm going to connect to it, I'm going to do connect. And then I'm going to give it a name. I'll say that this is a name field. And then I'm going to initialize that connection with the initial value. So we'll do init, and then we'll give it just the initial value. So in this case, it's just an empty string. I'm gonna hit save, go back over here, and we can see now we've got our first event in here, and it's got init. That's gonna give us our initial state. So our initial state is just an empty string. Nice. Okay, so now how do we update that? Well, what we can do is we can say connection dot, and then we're gonna send the text value, and we just give it what we got there, event target value. So let's hit save, and now hit refresh, and now as I type, we can see that we are putting out the text value, and in fact, we actually get all of the values as we go. Pretty cool. So at this point, you could do things like export this to a file and then import that. So potentially, if you have a tester that is finding an issue with your code, you can have them export all of your actions to a file, and then you can import that and catch up basically to where they were. It's pretty cool. So how do we integrate with this slider down here? This is really cool though. Like in Redux, if I do this, then it kind of rewinds the state and replays it. So what's actually happening here? Well, this is actually sending events back to me. So in order to do that, I need to subscribe to those events. So I'm going to do connection.subscribe, and we'll get an event there. And I'm just going to send that off to the console. What are we getting here? Console.log, and then we do event. What are we getting back from this Redux Devtools? All right, so we can see that we initially get this start value here, and I'll put in some values, and then I'll rewind, and we can see that we get all these dispatches. So we get an object, it's got a type, dispatch, and then it's got a state, which is the JSON stringified version of whatever I sent in. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So let's go and actually use that. So I'm going to go back over to our code. So I'm looking for event.type is dispatch. And with that, I am going to set two things. I'm going to set the span. Well, I'm going to get the name first. So name equals, and then JSON parse the event state. That's the data that's in the state. And then I'm going to set my inner text to that name. And I'm going to set my input element value to that name. Okay, let's give it a go. Nice. All right, now let's rewind. Zoop. How cool is that? Isn't that amazing? Holy moly. No Redux, just vanilla.js, just like that. How cool is that? All right, so one more thing before we leave our vanilla.js example. How will we go and make sure that this only runs if the Redux Devtools is actually around? Well, what we can do is just kind of put question marks in there, and that basically says, well, if Redux Devtools extension exists, then connect to it. Otherwise, don't. And then we can just, anywhere we use connection, we just put in question mark. And that will make it so that if we don't have Redux Devtools installed, then we just don't make those calls. That's probably the easiest way to do. Okay, so let's try this out in Redux. So the first thing I need to do is do a create with React app, and we'll just call this hooks test. All right, looks like we're done. I'm gonna stop the other port there, and let's go down to hooks test and try this out. So I'll go into the hooks test directory and then do yarn and start. Looks as you'd expect. So let's go basically do exactly the same thing that we had in the vanilla, but we'll do it in React. So we'll go back over here. We'll get rid of a bunch of this stuff. Okay, cool. And we'll have ourselves an input field, type text. Value is some name. We'll have to go get that. And then we'll have an onChange, which is going to set the name. And then we're going to have a span that has that name in it. Cool. So we need to make name first. So let's import use state from React. And we'll get our name. Nice. Okay, so let's try this out. Yep, works. Let me make it a little bit bigger so we can all see it. Okay, cool. Awesome. So now we need to connect to our DevTools. So I'm going to go over to my index.js, and then I'm going to grab some of this stuff. So we'll have connection.init there. We'll go back over here to our app.js. And where would we put that? Well, I think we should put that in a use effect. So let's go do that. Let's go create a use effect. that when the component mounts, we'll then connect to our DevTools. So we're only going to put a dependency array in here of an empty array. That means it's only going to run on essentially startup. Do we have any errors? Let's go over to our console and see. Nope, no errors. Looks good. We really don't know, though, if it's actually doing anything. So what we need to do is we need to have another use effect that looks at name. So we'll put in dependency array of name. And then when name changes, we're going to go and fire off that send message, right, with a new state. So what we need to do is get somehow this connection from here into here. So we'll use a ref for that. So we'll bring in use ref. And we'll have a connection ref. And the way that we set that was we just set current on it. So connection current .init, awesome. And we'll do the same thing down here, but we'll do send, and then we'll say name value, and then we'll give it the new name. All right, let's try this out. Cool. And we'll go over to inspector and see, are we doing that in Redux? Let's take a look. Nice. So anytime I change the name, I get a new name value and the state's in there. Awesome. And of course, we want to go and hook it up to this. So let's try that out. So the next thing we need to do is go back over here and bring in our subscribe. So let's go take a look at what we had down here, subscribe, and we'll paste that in. And it's connection.current.subscribe. And then we've got our name down here. So we'll do set name and give it name. And there we go. Now hit refresh and I type, and then let's see if I can rewind. I can, but what's kind of weird, but because what's happening here is by setting the name, we are sending another event to Redux, right? So every time I do a set name here, I'm sending a new value. And so we can see that this name value 36 or whatever is now getting larger and larger and larger. And this list keeps getting larger and larger and larger. So what we need to do is have a way of basically saying, hey, I'm actually getting a dispatch from Redux Devtools. Ignore this update. So we'll create another ref called event from DevTools. And we'll set that to false to start. And then if we see an event from DevTools, we'll set that to true. And then set it back to false afterwards. And then down here, we'll say if we're not getting an update from DevTools, then we will send the message. So let's try it again. Okay, looks good. And I'll rewind. And nope, getting exactly the same problem. And why is that? Well, what's happening here is that use effect is asynchronous. So by the time that this fires, we're already set back to false again. So a way that we can fix that is by, instead of doing this use effect to actually track this value, we'll just wrap this state setter. And this state setter will both set that state, but also go and send off a message if we aren't getting that message back from DevTools. So we'll create a use callback here. And we'll call that set name. And it's going to take a name. And we'll give it an empty dependency array. And now we are bumping up against this set name. So this is the, we'll just call it real set name. So the first thing we want to do is call that real set name name. And then we want to go and send off that event. And then I can change this to the underscore name, hit save, and let's go back over to our Chrome, try it out. And now let's try it. Oh, that is so slick. All right, so let's make it a little bit more generic before we leave. Let's go and turn this into a custom hook so that you can use it anywhere you want for any type of data that you want. So we'll go back over here and copy all that out. And I'm going to create a custom hook called use monitored state. And I'll take an initial value. Paste that in there. And what we're going to return is, well, name and set name. And we'll change those pretty soon. And then down here, instead of the use state, we'll just use monitor state. So set name. And we'll just Put an empty string in there. Let's make sure that it still works. And refresh, cool, rewind, cool. But now I want to make it a little bit more generic. So initial value goes in here. We'll rename name to say value. We'll rename that one to real set value. And let's see, this one can be value. And we'll just say that that's value. And monitored state. You can make this whatever you want. Okay, let's see. So set name, it's going to be set value. Looking pretty good. Okay, so do I have anything that says name anywhere in there now? Not really. Hold on. Oh, name. I'll change that out to value. Okay. Yeah. So pretty much I have name exactly where I need name. And let's give it a try. Awesome. And we can rewind. Perfect. Okay, cool. So now you have a reusable hook. Of course, all that code is available to you in GitHub for free down in the link in the description down below. And while you're down there, you might want to hit that like button if you like the video and the subscribe button if you really like the video. Okay, so let's do this again, but this time let's do this with Zustand. All right, one more time, we need to go and create a new Create React app. Go back up one and we will create a React app called Zustand test. Okay, looks good. I'm going to go in there and then I'm going to add Zustand. And I'm going to start it up. And it looks good, what you'd expect from the Create React app. So let's go back over and start hacking on it. And I want to go down into our Zustand test. And let's start off by building out our state. So I'm going to import create from Zustand. And then with that, I am going to create a use customer hook. And we'll start off with a first, last, and a job. And then we'll have set first. I'm going to get rid of the state there. Don't need that. You can just set the specific value. And then set last. And finally, set job. Cool. All right, we have our customer hook there. So let's get rid of our UI and start building out a UI for that. Okay, so I'm going to have a grid with a template columns like that, maybe a simple gap. And let's have a div where we have first, and then an input field where our value is first, and our on change is to set first. And then we'll have last and job, and then set last and set job. Okay, cool. So, but we need, of course, first, last, and all that. So let's bring that in from our use customer. Okay, let's take a look. Nice. But let's make this a little bit smaller so I can put it on the screen nicely. So we'll make that a width of 400. All right, nice. Okay, cool. All right, so now how do we go and integrate this with Redux Devtools, because it doesn't know anything about Zustand or any of that. So we got to go and connect first. But what we're going to do is we're going to make use of the fact that Zustand is externally accessible as well as accessible within the React context. So you can actually get and set the state outside of React. So let's first connect to DevTools and get that set up. Go back over here to our vanilla version. And we'll just get our connection. We'll pop it in here outside of the React context. We'll call this form fields. And we'll start off with the initial value. So I'm going to do use customer and then dot get state. So that's going to set us up with the initial state. So let's hit refresh. And what we can see is now over here in our state chart, we have first, last, and job. Cool. Awesome. So the next thing to do would be to subscribe to the store so that when the store changes, we then automatically go and send off that send event. So I'm going to do subscribe, and it's going to give us our new state. And we are just going to send that off to our connection. So we'll do connection !dot. And we don't even need to stringify it. We just need to send the new state. In fact, if we stringify it, we're going to mess ourselves up. All right, so let's try this out. And very cool. You can actually see it filling in over here. That is awesome. But of course, nothing happens when I rewind because we're not actually subscribed to it. So let's go and now subscribe to the Redux Devtools. So we'll go back over here to our old code and pop it in here. And now we want to go and set that state with the state that's coming in. So this is the new state down here, and we're JSON parsing it. Cool. So let's go and do our use customer. And instead of get state, we're going to set state. And we're just going to give it that new state. Okay. Let's hit refresh. Try it one more time. Cool. And now it's rewind. And now we're running into that same issue as we did before, right? Because what's happening here is we are sending a new set state, which is in turn firing this subscribe. But I think it's actually going to be a lot easier to fix in this case because it's synchronous. So let's do that. Let is update from DevTools to false. And then we'll say, if we're not an update from DevTools, then send that state. And of course, we got to set that properly. So we'll put that down here. We'll say that that is an update from DevTools. And here we go. Let's slide it back and forth. Oh, that is just so awesome. Check that out. You can apply this to any state manager. You can even apply this to no state manager at all. If you just want to do React or in vanilla, how cool is this? And imagine this being applied to your data so that you can see how your application changes and get a much better debugging experience for free. How cool is that? Of course, well, I hope you enjoyed this and learned a lot more about DevTools and the kind of functionality they can bring to your debugging experience. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to put those in the comments section down below. And of course, if you like the video, hit that like button. And if you really like the video, hit the subscribe button and click on that bell and you'll be notified the next time a new Blue Collar Coder comes out.